Welcome to today's EDGEy Conversation. And today, again, we have a bunch of Edge with us talking about edgy things. Today, our discussion is becoming or being a partner of choice. So as communities of faith, as the United Church of Canada, as Edge in this conversation, it's all about relationships. We've been really digging into the importance of relationships and that like the end result doesn't always matter. It's actually like the process and the relationship. So as we start talking about partnerships and putting relationships first, anything coming to mind, maybe even like how to live into that or what that looks like in our role or in a community of faith, like what does putting relationships first look like?
Maybe I'll jump in. The first thing that came into mind, Carla, is believing that the congregation, the church, has something to offer to the community. I think the last decades of numerical decline in membership and so on, that's a part of a shift. It's not a part of a decline of the church, it's part of a transformation, because there are other things that are on the way up as that happens. But from the viewpoint of most of us in the pew that see the church as how it's been, feels like this long period of decline. And so we feel like, and we hear messages, the church is no longer relevant or whatever that is. And nothing could be further from the truth. In our experience of working with other stakeholders in the community that want to see social change, that want to see change for good for people and communities in the very areas that are the values at the heart of the United Church: justice, equity, anti-racism, care for the vulnerable, being in relationship, in community, intergenerational community. The church has huge amounts, the United Churches have huge amounts to offer in all of those areas. So that's the first thing, to believe there is real value for the congregations going into their community with that question. What can we partner on? What can we do? What difference can we make together?
So you talk about this decline, and that really brings up an interesting question to me then, is that like maybe we never needed a partner before, right? Like maybe we had so much power and like we had so much that we're just like, no, we can just do it ourselves. And so we just did it alone. So at this point, like to start going from, okay, now actually we do need partners. In fact, we always did need partners. We just didn't know it. And so starting on building partnerships and turning our relationships into collaborations, what might be a first step, or like what are some best practices that you've been seeing in your work that would help and maybe inform some of the communities of faith and even people who work within the United Church of Canada to start learning how to collaborate? What might feel like a good first thing there?
I think one of the first things to start doing is trying to try and open your doors. It is challenging to invite the community in or to get out, but you can't partnership and you can't be in relationship if you don't know the people. So if you're just sitting there saying we're going to partnership, but you're not trying to talk to anybody, or you're not finding anybody, or you're not just in actual grassroots conversations within the community and within the people there, you're not going to go anywhere. So communication is key.
I think kind of building off of that is that each congregation is full of a whole bunch of people that live lives that are plural, so someone who's working will be working at like a local community organization or something like that. They may not necessarily think about what are these different hats that they're wearing in their lives and how can they connect them outside of just being the person that connects those things. So one of the ways that we can definitely lean into these relationships is like identifying who in our congregation or who already that we're engaging with is working or in partnership with these other organizations already. And then like looking to that gift of connection that already exists and leaning into it even further, like enabling that person who is the connector to realize that these things can be connected and that we can be in relationship through them.
Yeah, I often think we do our missional planning without any reference to the mission that individuals in the congregation are already doing in their lives, like these connections to organizations. Yeah, and also what you were saying, Sam, work with congregations around having the leadership have a practice of calling other community leaders, getting a conversation set up, whether in person over coffee on Zoom, and asking 3 questions like, what do you see is needed? What do you think we could do together? I guess that's 2 questions. There was a third, I can't remember what it was, but it's simple, right? Like, what do we have? What do you think we have to bring? That's the other one. What do you think the church has to bring to that? May or may not be true, and maybe things we hadn't thought of. But just exploring those questions together. What do you have to bring? How can we work together? And then community leaders roundtables are just such a, not just individual one-on-ones, but convening stakeholders in the community and saying, what's happening? What's needed? What do we have? What can we do together? What do you think the church can do? All very rich, fertile questions that, in my experience, community stakeholders engage enthusiastically, and they're grateful for being convened and what they think of as kind of neutral territory of the United Church. So.
No, it's good. Sometimes when speaking with communities of faith, I ask, like, think about a story about a moment of change. And whenever they tell the story, like 9 times, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, it starts with a conversation. So I love that it started about asking the questions, like the holistic piece, Alexander, what you're talking about, like who do we already know, and like just having those conversations. And so it's really interesting that when change happens, it starts with a conversation. And so all of us have been talking about that as kind of a best practice. But when you have the conversation, you're putting people first, then it's really kind of neat what kind of ideas come out of that. We find in Embracing the Spirit grant applicants that 50% of the ideas are actually from the community. And another 25% of the ideas are actually by the community of faith in response to what they're hearing in the community. So that's really like 3/4 of the ideas of something new that's an experiment actually comes from conversations with the community. Makes you question the other 25%, maybe. Just kidding. No, they're all good. But but what's kind of neat is also what we see from these relationships, how all of a sudden the sense of joy starts happening, right? So like this upward spiral starts happening from this. And what I'd love to throw out to you is there a partnership that we've had, or a relationship that's really been life-giving to you? Because I think that's what, like, in each of these, it's a spark for something different, right? Like, so 75% of the new experiments that are really life-giving came from conversations with the community. So as Edge, in either your personal life or within your work life or any part of your life that you'd like to talk about, was there a time that a conversation or a relationship or a partnership maybe was mind-blowing to you? Maybe it was inspirational and validating, and soul-filling. I don't know if any of you want to share an example of what that could look like.
I can definitely share an example from my personal and professional life, I guess. That the church that I landed in when originally like starting to come back into church space was an ecumenical church. And so watching the way in which like these 2 denominations worked together, and these 2 congregations that are distinct, but also one working together in the same building, it was really interesting to me, and also kind of helped me to figure out, well, what is the denominational presence? Like, what's the purpose of that? What are some of the differences, and what things do I need to start kind of paying attention to in a way that I didn't really do before when growing up in the church, and just kind of was like, I like the people that I'm around, but now I'm starting to dive into, well, what's at the heart of these different relationships, my relationship with the United Church denomination and with the Presbyterian denomination in Canada, and what are values and drivers that kind of link those things. So I think that definitely is a kind kind of a partnership relationship that I stumbled into and got to observe first before participating in. And it was quite transformational.
And I think for me, one of the first things I thought of was the very first social innovation challenge that we ever hosted, and all the different stakeholders and all the different pitchers, all the different social entrepreneurs that came, and the partnerships and relationships that formed beyond just us. They formed in their own. But for that one specifically, I was there as a member of EDGEy, and one of the, I believe the actual winner overall, the raw carrot, my other job at the time also ended up working with them in website development. And it was just like, I was at an event for the church, for EDGEy, and we were bringing this together. And it also partnered with my other job and bringing in different gifts that way. And just seeing how maybe this web development company that I worked for wouldn't have necessarily been the person of choice to help build this website for this great nonprofit, this social enterprise that has expanded beyond multiple different denominations. But here it was, another company that I was affiliated with that brought it in. And it was just seeing that power of partnership. And it really was the conversation. Had we not been there, had we not witnessed them telling the story, had we not heard all these conversations, those different relationships wouldn't have been built. And I think that was just a moment of inspiration that, wow, it really just connects everything once you start talking.
Yeah, there are so many examples that come to mind. One of them is a Google search I did one time for a communication consultant that ended up in a very rich partnership with Carla. Which one do I want to talk about? This hero work. I'd talk about CMHC because it's probably the biggest kind of single impact. It's a partnership with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation at a time when the federal government was doing a national housing strategy, and got $20 million worth of access to capital to form the United Resource Property Corporation and to build 5,000 units of affordable housing over the next 15 years in Canada. Huge impact. And they helped us remember who we are as church. They helped our senior leadership remember who they are by expecting us to be church and to act as church in the community, and to entrust us with that kind of resource to do it well, because they saw the potential that sometimes internally we don't see. So that was one. But hero work is very close to my heart because this is a group that's not faith related at all, and yet they kind of act like church. If you think of the Pentecostal moment of gathering all these different languages, cultures, peoples together in the community around a vision of hope for the world and for people and their communities. The hero work is about going into a community, first of all, recognizing that there's a huge infrastructure problem for charitable and sometimes not-for-profits. There's money available to do programming, but very, very rarely is there money to fund the maintenance and creation of good infrastructure, facilities, and so on. So they recognized that problem, and they thought, well, let's just gather the community. Like, there's people that would help with this. So they gather tradespeople and people that can provide materials and other people who would just do laborers, and then they get journeymen who can train the laborers to do the work well and do some of it as volunteers and some of it professionally, and do these fantastic renovations, like serious major renovations, $500,000, $1 million to this failing infrastructure at, like, originally it was like 20% of cost, and maybe at a sustainable level around 30%, somewhere around there. But the thing that really got me was on their website, I saw this picture right at the top, right at the front. And the guy that we knew as the CEO was in like a kilt and sunglasses, like Ray-Ban glasses. There's this parade, right? And there's like clowns and kids and families and a piper. For some reason, hey, everything's better with a piper from my point of view. But they were going to the unveiling of what everyone had done, right, in this renovation in the community. And there's like barbecue and celebration, and everyone's going, wow, look, isn't this amazing? And I could just picture, as soon as that celebration was over, in everybody's mind is going to be the question, look what we did. What else could we do? Like, look at what we can do when we act together. And that's something that every community needs more of. So and perfect, churches needing that infrastructure too, but churches also being able to convene those relationships in the community to bring volunteers and potentially tradespeople and donors to it. It's a great partnership.
So there's so much possibility. I think all of the examples, each of us can kind of think about our own context and say, hey, yeah, there's something there. It might not look exactly like the stories that we just heard, but it always starts with the relationship first, with people first. And that makes me think of the second commandment, love thy neighbor. And so when we think about partnerships and we think about relationships first, is that not actually just loving our neighbors?